It's time for Bringing the Heat with Trey Lyle.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome on into the first episode of the 2026 NASCAR season of Bringing the Heat. We have a season preview for you, so this podcast is going to be a little different than the typical Bringing the Heat format. I am Trey Lyle, the host of this. Joining me, as he typically does, he's behind the scenes a couple times, or he'll co-host me at Caleb Barnes _ Caleb Barnes with me. But this podcast, of course, is brought to you by our good friends at Billy's Tequila. Why wait for the party to find you? Bring it home. Orders Billy's Tequila right now at billystequila.com and get it delivered straight to your order. This isn't your average tequila. This is added free small batch, 100% blue agave crafted for those who live bold. Smooth enough to sip, clean enough for cocktails, and built for every victory lap in life. So don't just celebrate, race a life. Order now at billystequila.com and make sure you use promo code RACER right now with Billy's Tequila. That is our proud sponsor here. Again, that promo code is RACER for 10% off right now at Billy's Tequila. Make sure you use promo code RACER. Excuse me, that's for 5% off any bottle with promo code RACER, RACER. That is at Billy's Tequila. I'm thinking of our proud other sponsors, My Place Hotels, for the 10% off there as well. So shout out to My Place Hotels as well, but proud to be sponsored this podcast by Billy's Tequila. All right, Caleb. Good,
nice plugs, Trey. Good job.
Hey, my bad.
Hey, it's also a different episode. You want to tell everybody when we're recording this?
We're recording during the duels.
Right in the middle, between one
right
and
in the middle. So Joey Logano is getting interviewed right now by Fox. Shout out to Casey Mears for making it after Corey LaJoy wrecks on the final lap. So we're recording pre-duel 2. So if something crazy happens in duel 2, you will see our live reactions to it. So it's kind of a taste, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/front stretch, for how the front stretch watch party will be on Sundays. Yeah, so get excited for that. So we're in between duels. They're interviewing Joe Logano and Ryan Blaney right now, as Joey got the win in duel number 1. Casey Mears just sent it, man, and snuck his way in. We'll see how duel number 2 shakes out.
No breaks.
Literally. But looking at this, welcome back, Caleb. How was your off season, man? It flew by. I had to do I think I did 10 podcasts during I did 10 trial podcasts. We had Front Stretch Jeopardy, and we had the one 2 of them reacting to the chase. So that is how many podcasts I did during the off season. How many did you do? I guess you didn't do really many, but how was your off season?
It was too short. I didn't do many podcasts, but I was busy keeping up with the lawsuit things up through December. We did have some help during the week of the trial, which was nice, but still keeping up with that kind of, I guess, extended the season a little bit, maybe for about a month. And then at this point now, I'm full in the middle of college basketball season, keeping up with my Kentucky Wildcats and Liberty Flames, two teams that are having some good, I guess 2026 years. So I'm like still full college basketball mode at the moment. Like my brain is just barely shifted to that. And the fact that there's race cars on the track. I think also like football season keeps getting extended. And that's also been like a weird thing as well, to where there's not any more space between football season and basketball season and racing. It just all kind of comes together now. So that's my off season, I suppose.
Yeah, and let's look at it. So we're going to look at all the storylines coming into the season, starting with kind of the bad part we have to talk about first, the negatives of the offseason. First, the unfortunate, tragic deaths of Greg Biffle, Michael Annett, Denny Hamlin's father, obviously in a house fire that collected his mom as well, who got severely injured. Dennis Hamlin. It was really, and you throw in the trial, which we'll talk about in a second, but this seemed to be a tumultuous offseason for NASCAR, truly. And, some big personalities, some guys who, obviously Greg Biffle, which we're going to talk about a little bit later more specifically. But ultimately, how was the offseason in terms of just, it felt like a lot of the season start is coming as a way to hit the reset button, in a lot of different ways. We'll include the chase in that, but especially with all the negativity that happened this offseason, It feels like this could be a very refreshing restart to kind of just the vibes around NASCAR.
Yeah, I think potentially, and I mean that's what I hope. I hope it's a good race weekend. I hope it's a good couple of races to open up the season because just with the way that last season ended, all the frustration around the championship and the way that that went for Denny Hamlin, then all the deaths in the offseason, the trial and those things going back and forth, just feels like there's not a ton of like. I mean, you could say negative momentum, but I just feel like it's really been like after all these things. NASCAR's really just been like, hey, like we just got to take a step back for a little bit and try to get out of the limelight. 'Cause it feels like every press has been bad press lately, and so yeah, it is pretty neat to see all the tributes for Biffle this weekend with the RFK number fonts, the colleague 16 AJ Allmendinger. I did have the chance to talk to someone on my day job who lives here in Kentucky and would help train some of the NASCAR drivers who had their pilot's license, and he had a very good relationship with Greg Biffle. So I got to hear about that. But of course, yeah, just like that was difficult. And then I mean that was probably the biggest shock of the off season. But then the stuff with Denny's dad was also just really, really hard to see because you saw the emotion out of Denny after his Las Vegas win, and then again after the championship and the way that finished. And part of that was because, I mean, Denny had said that he didn't know that his dad was going to be around much longer. But then kind of knowing that something like that might be coming, but not that way, not a fire coming and doing what it did. So I'm really curious to see how the season gets going for the guys involved, for guys like the RFK team, also guys like Garrett Mitchell, Cletus McFarland, who's trying to do some more racing this year. I'm curious to see how he picks up and kind of carries that torch. And then for Denny as well, just really interested to see how the season starts for him and to see kind of where he's at with his how bright his passion is still for racing. So yeah, just a super like, I mean, that's what we mean. It was a long off season. It was a ton of things happening, and good to finally see some race cars on the track.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you had everything that went, and it felt like the Clash didn't really provide it because of how many hurdles they had to go through just to get the race on, and then the race itself was just so long and so stop start because of the
Yeah.
weather. I watching this duel, it kind of felt like, all right, we're getting back in the swing of things. Watching qualifying last night on Wednesday night as we record this on Thursday night, and one more thing about the trial itself, separating from obviously the other tragedies. While that wasn't tragic, it just the headline from it. While I think a positive outcome ended, just because of all the negative words that were being said by both sides. Obviously, it resulted in Steve Phelps leaving NASCAR and a leadership structure change. But ultimately, in terms of looking at it for the teams, as someone you for our site did a great job with the trial. You and Samuel Stubbs kind of had to write an article every week basically about it. What do you think ultimately is the lasting effects of this trial going forward as we look into this season and keeping these teams around, which was kind of the purpose behind the trial in the first place?
Yeah, I think that is the main thing. It is the permanence of the charters and kind of treating these teams more like those sports franchises as opposed to these, I guess, billionaires who were slowly becoming millionaires and dumping all this money into the sport just to really not gain back a whole lot on return. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway is that hopefully, obviously, you have the big powerhouse teams that have been around a while, but just so many of these new teams like 2311 have like they come in really hot to the sport, and then just after a couple of years things end up burning out and some major management happens or the team as a whole ends up collapsing, kind of like you see over the years with Furniture Row, like Stuart Haas, the way that I guess they're still technically in the sport, but under very different management and things like that. So I think this will really help teams on the NASCAR side be able to get some permanence and really be more up to the owners on up to them on how long they want to stay in the sport. And then also very interested to see. I don't think we'll see any effects super big here at the start of the season, but kind of as things go with how the leadership changes and see what that might bring in the future as well.
So looking at this, the biggest headline for the offseason, we did a whole pod about this. Is the Chase returning? And while we kind of went in depth about that on that podcast, and if you want to hear more of our in depth thoughts about that, please go check that previous episode out from January. I want to I have two questions when it comes to this because it's going to be talked about. If you look at the drivers, who is the biggest driver that you think benefits from having this Chase format back?
I think this is a tough one because there's a number of drivers that I feel like are super consistent. But honestly, I think the guy, and this guy reminds me a lot of Jimmy Johnson and the way that Jimmy Johnson used to perform. I think it really benefits a guy like William Byron. I think you can talk about Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, especially Hamlin. Larson's kind of been, sometimes he's a bit of a hot and cold type of guy. The way that Hamlin's grown as a veteran, I think he's been really consistent as well. But William Byron still has a really long career in front of him. And he's a guy that just pretty much everywhere you go now, he's a top 5 guy at worst. Some days, maybe a little bit, the car's not quite there. But whenever he's got a good car under him, he's going to be up in competing for the lead or competing for a top 5 finish. And I think that consistency is really going to benefit him. The flip side, the guys that this kind of hurts, like obviously.
Wait.
Okay.
Wait.
I'm sorry.
You're looking at the notes. I'm proud of you, Caleb. But I have to ask that. I also have to say mine first.
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of you.
You jumped the restart here, so we're put
Am I
it
gonna
out.
get
Put
black
it out.
flag?
Yeah, that's a black flag.
Gotta
Right
go to
there.
the rear.
Yeah, you're in timeout for 5 minutes. So let me cook. And I'm gonna bring this guy up later. Hint, hint. For the that's called a tease in the business, folks. I think it benefits Chase Elliott. I think Chase Elliott's secret great skill is his consistency. While he may not get in victory lane as his fan base wants him to, and they get on Alan Gustafson as much as they do. I think Alan Gustafson is one of the elite crew chiefs in all of NASCAR. But I truly think Chase Elliott is one of the most consistent performers. And consistently, if he has a 5th place car, he'll get 5th place finish. If he has an 8th place car, he'll get an 8th place finish. And he can win races. And I think Chase Elliott, someone who is really good at finishing up front and qualifying well, is someone who really truly can benefit from this. And he may be a name I bring up a little bit later on in this podcast here. But you jumped it. But I will ask you, the biggest loser driver-wise, you were going to mention SVG, so I'll let you mention SVG. And people say Joey Logano. Possibly, I think you could. I would look at guys like Josh Berry, Austin Cindric, Austin Dillon, those guys who have been able to win and get in the playoffs, but have not shown the consistency that you need ultimately to perform at this kind of format. I think those are like the 3 guys. You look at Josh Berry. Josh Berry got that early win in Vegas, but didn't really have the consistency last year. Same kind of goes for Austin Cindric. Same obviously goes for Austin Dillon with his win at Richmond. Those are 3 guys that I focus on that probably are bigger losers from this format because they have shown the ability to win, but we truly have not seen the day in, day out consistency that you want in order to make a chase run that we've seen in the past. So, all right, now you can, even though you jumped the restart, Caleb, you can talk about SVG.
Get the green flag's back out. I'm getting to go again.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, he's the obvious one who was.
You finished your pit road penalty. You finished.
Yeah. Getting back up to speed. Like the whole reason, or maybe not the whole reason, but one of the main reasons I feel like he came over here was because of that ability to kind of win and be almost an automatic lock into the playoffs. And so I think that hurts. But I will say, I mean, from SVG to any of those guys that you just mentioned, I mean, I think there is real potential for a number of those guys to go out and prove that they are improving. Especially, I mean, Austin Dillon's been around a while. Austin Cindric's been around since 2022, but it's an opportunity for Josh Berry to, from last year to this year, show that he's improved with that Wood Brothers team. And same for SVG. It's an opportunity for him to show that he's improved his oval program. And that might be a little tease for me to as we get to further down to see who's going to be in competition once we get to those final 10 races. But yeah, it'll be really interesting because I I guess maybe the biggest loser, if you want to throw in a group of drivers, are like those super speedway specialists, the guys that really just had the super speedways marked on the calendar because that was their chance to win and get in. But I mean, the field is so even, it's so equal that it's really hard to predict those one or two or three standouts that are going to perform better than they did the year before. And I think that could be a Josh Berry, an SVG, maybe even an Austin Cindric.
A guy you could also argue is AJ Allmendinger, who obviously is driving for Colleague Racing. While Colleague Racing probably has lower expectations on the Cup side, and you ask that, it's because they obviously are returning with Ram in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. They will have 5 cars this season. Obviously, coming in, we knew three of them. They were going to be Justin Haley, Daniel Dye, and Butterbean Queen were 3 locked in. And then they had Ram Race for the Seat that came out on Fox and was on YouTube, where they had drivers across this country. It came down to Carson Ferguson, and the man who ultimately won it was Minnie Tyrell, who is a Cars Tour champion and one of the best late model stocks. Do you want to shout out Carson Ferguson? We'll see him in a truck at Martinsville later this season, but we'll talk about that all-star car in a second. But first, your overall thoughts on the show itself, Caleb. It felt like, obviously, we weren't really around for the Gong Show back in the day. I remember it, but I don't remember watching it. Obviously, it is part of Front Stretch Jeopardy lore. Is the Gong Show by Roush Racing, but this new version of it, Ram Race for the Seat, I thought it was really good. I thought it was really, really well produced. Maybe Chris, oh my God, I'm blanking on his last name.
Trice.
Chris Rice becomes a villain of the sport. Some people found him pretty annoying.
I know, yeah.
But ultimately, I thought, as for telling the stories of the drivers, I thought they did a fairly good job, especially for the 2 guys that they ultimately needed to tell the story of, which was Carson Ferguson and the guy that basically everyone knew, when the industry already knew the outcome. I still think they did a really good job, especially telling the story of Minnie Tyrell.
Yeah, that's the tough part, is like just from the first episode, and I'll be honest, I didn't get to watch all the episodes, but from the start, I don't think it was spoiled for me, but I think just watching it and knowing the names kind of around the car store and things like that, I just kind of felt like Minnie was going to be the guy that got it done. But it was like, at first, I think I was a little bit skeptical of like, oh, like I already know it's going to be one of these Cars Tours guys that is going to basically keep moving up the progression to the truck series. But then the more I kind of got to see it and think about it, like, it is really cool that other guys had that opportunity and got close to that opportunity to, like, it wasn't about the sponsorship dollars or the name recognition or whatever, because I do think a lot of your race fans from the car store are going to see Minnie Tyrell in a truck and recognize that name versus a Carson Ferguson. You're like, who the heck is this? But like, that's so cool that was an opportunity. And I don't know what their plans are for the future of it, but like, if that is the way, if they continue to try to develop that drivers that way, I think that's a really neat thing that Colleague is able to bring drivers that they want to compete for the seat, as opposed to having to wait on guys that bring funding to the team.
Couple notes for you, Colleague Ram. I guess you can technically shout out Dana White because it was his production company. One, finished the season before the ARCA test, where everyone knows who, when they see Timothy Tyrell and I think it was Landon Huffman were the 2 on the list, and Landon Huffman clearly has no shot to win it at that point. You kind of spoil your ending, and I think they also spoiled their ending because the times at South Boston Speedway got leaked. So that was another way it came out. Obviously, you didn't know the whole point system at the time. But the second thing, when you clearly see, oh, Minnie Tyrell and no Carson Ferguson, because you have to test an ARCA car, you have to race in the ARCA race to do the truck race. Maybe just get rid of that rule for them. I don't get it.
Do it earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, just release it earlier before that. Speaking of Minnie, I know we talked about, we'll talk more throughout the season about Ram itself and their impact in NASCAR. Obviously, they want to go Cup racing, whether it's this next season in 2027 or 2028. You would presume with Call It, but you would also presume with another team. And we're going to talk about the silly seasons part of this in a second. But how well do you think Minnie will do this season? Obviously, Today they had practice, and he got to deal with tech for the first time, and it did not go well for him. I think he only got like 3 laps on the track, very at the end. So, how well do you think Mini Tyrell will do as the season goes on?
I think he'll kind of follow a similar progression of guys like Caden Honeycutt or Butterbean, who they come in and you don't really see much of them on the bigger tracks or the mile and a halves, but then like they really show up at the short tracks and kind of bring some of that experience, familiarity with them. But I mean, I am really curious to see how he does, and I mean overall how that entire team does, because Butterbean stepping into a Tricon truck like that they're going to be fast anyways.
You mean Caden Honeycutt in a Tricon truck?
Well, now, yeah, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, Butterbean last year or the last.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
When he made that start. Was it at North Wilkesboro?
Yes, yeah, and then I mean, like, I think Caden was with Nice, and then with Friesen, and I mean, even whenever Caden,
and then he filled in for Friesen, because
yeah,
he made the championship 4.
Especially once he stepped into that 52, like he did a lot better. So like I don't know what that level of equipment's going to be like for Mini, but I think it'll take a little bit to get his feet under him. But like I don't think it'll be like a fish out of water either. I think it'll kind of maybe a similar to what we saw out of like Geo last year in the like that in that Tricon truck. Well, maybe we'll see that Mini.
He's obviously. Poor Honeycutt is in the 11, which was the best truck, and obviously Corey Heim played a big part in that.
No pressure.
No pressure indeed. But the cooler, maybe just as cool. I don't think I would say it's cooler. But they're having an all-star car this year, and in the 25, and they decided to drop a bomb to start out. Tony Stewart is racing back in NASCAR, and I mean I get like. This was announced post-trial, so like if you think about the trial, and Tony Stewart's name was brought up a lot with the SRX stuff, but two-parter: your thoughts on Tony Stewart doing this, and 2, if you gave me a bold guess on someone in that car or that truck, I should say, for this season, who would it be? I mean, it's hard to get bolder than Tony Stewart if you like predicted that.
It is really cool to see Tony Stewart back at the track. I would love for someone to be able to like dive into his motivations for driving that truck and for showing back up. Given
I think
all
it's just a fit
trial.
Dodge does his in our NHRA. He's on his NHRA team. Is my guess.
I did totally forget about it though. Like, I mean, I saw he was at the track, and then I saw a picture and it was like, oh, Tony Stewart's truck. And I was like, wait a second, that was this weekend? Like, because I remember seeing it announced. My brain didn't put it together that he was on track in that truck for this weekend's race. Man, I don't even know where to go with my bold guess on who would drive the car. Because that's like, I want to just throw out like some like massive name, but like, I'm trying to think through, I don't know if there'd be any obstacles to different guys that would like have different I don't know contract or manufacturer obligations. I want to say someone like modern though. Like it would be really cool to see some modern F1 or IndyCar guy like try to hop in for a truck race, kind of like Kimi Räikkönen did quite a few years ago for. I think
we're kind of getting that at St. Pete. This is not something we're going to talk about.
True, yeah.
But Dario Franchitti and James Sintcliffe are both going to race at the the truck race at the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. So, by the way, if you're watching along in our timing things, Duel 2 just now started. So, if anything happens during,
you're looking up at the screen,
we'll let you know. But yeah, I think it's really cool Tony's doing it. I think this truck. This is like the most star-studded truck race in the history of ever. You have a lot of Cup guys in it, sneakily, like McDowell, Hocevar. You have John Hunter Nemechek, but then you throw in Travis Pastrana, Cletus McFarlane, Tony Stewart. Like you could argue the 3 most famous people at the racetrack this weekend are all in the truck race and not in the Cup race. In Cletus McFarlane, Travis Pastrana, and obviously Tony Stewart. This is going to be fascinating to watch. How they handle this. I think a good guess would be a Casey Kane, who's raced in Dodge. Obviously was kind of the face of when Dodge was last in the NASCAR Cup Series. I think that is a really good guess there. But I like your idea of modern guys getting in the truck. Obviously, I think a couple weeks will be their Cup guys. Just because they have no real affiliation with Chevy anymore. They're just because Dodge doesn't have a Cup team. They drive Chevys. But it is tough. I do think towards the end of the season, you're going to start to see what team is emerging as the other Dodge team, if there's going to be another Dodge team in that 25. But obviously, Tony said he's one and done. So I think Casey Kane is a good guess. Obviously, it was appearing that Greg Biffle was going to do it. Obviously, he was on the show. So you would assume that the Biff was going to have a time. But I'm going with Stephen Malazzi as my bold pick, because if you watched the latest episode of Happy Hour and followed him on social media, he's getting a great pitch on why he should be in one of those trucks. So I'm putting it out in the universe. Stephen Malazzi will drive the 25 at some point this season for Colleague Racing and Ram.
I do wonder, just as I'm trying to rack my brain, like I think about Tony Stewart making that start. Maybe some of these other SRX guys come over and try to make a truck start. Maybe guys like Elio Castroneves, or maybe even, Bill Elliott drove one of those SRX races for a little bit.
Might be a little too old.
Maybe, but
and I also
again,
don't think that HMS will be happy that Chase's dad is driving a different manufacturer. I would.
I don't know how much. I don't know how much they would care. And he made that Xfinity start a couple years ago.
But it was in a Chevy.
That's true. But I don't know that they would care. I feel like he's his own person. I'm trying to think, I feel like that's who they would go. They would get some of these older stars. Realistically, I feel like that's who you would see, some of those older names that either haven't raced in a while or that you recognize from a while ago. I think that's realistically who we might see. But one guy who I think is maybe not doing a ton of things. What about Daniel Ricciardo? I know he
That'd be cool.
Drive NASCAR, but
I do wonder, I think he's still technically a Red Bull ambassador, and they're now Ford. So we could see him in a Ford.
That's the problem with all these modern drivers. It's I don't know what the limitations would be to them driving a Ram truck.
Yeah, because because in Formula One. All right. So the final big kind of storyline heading into the season is silly season is going to be rampant. We're going to probably talk about it a lot more after a really quiet silly season last year. Lots of drivers could be changing teams this offseason. Obviously, two that are locked up. And we can quickly touch on these. Kyle Larson signing a 5-year deal with HMS. Carson Hocevar signing long-term, as the phrasing, into the next decade with Spire Motorsports. I feel like those are two kind of does, and we don't really need to talk much about them. So let's move on because we want to save your time for our great listeners who are listening to this. Feels like the focus of this season is, if you want to look at two drivers, Tyler Reddick, who I would favor staying with 2311, but in terms of, I don't want to say gettable is the right word, but available free agents outside of Kyle Larson, you could put him at the top of the list. And Kyle Busch and just his future. Obviously, I think Reddick, might be, the prime free agent. What are your thoughts on those two? And then we'll talk about maybe the best car available, or the future of maybe the most intriguing car.
I honestly, we're talking about Reddick here. Kind of my maybe hot take is that I feel like Reddick has to maybe prove some things to show that he still has that same level of desire and drive and talent. I mean, we saw him make the championship a couple years ago and saw what that meant to him there. But I mean, that team, I feel like that team just had a lot of misfires last year and didn't quite look the best, didn't quite look like themselves. And again, I don't know if that's a team thing. I don't know if that was a Reddick thing. I know he had some personal things going on as well. So I honestly, I feel like he's got some driving to do this year to maybe put himself as the top available or desirable. Maybe, is that a word? Guy.
Yeah.
I don't know about Alex. I know a lot of people keep wanting
whoa. Wait a second.
Not again.
You did it again, because I said the most intriguing car.
Guys.
I know, but we were talking about Tyler Reddick and Kyle Busch. I said the most intriguing car is still available. I didn't say it yet.
Oh, I thought you were talking about a different car. Oh, well.
I was talking about Kyle Busch. Oh, what car are you talking about? Oh, okay. We'll get to that. I have a question for you then.
Okay.
So Kyle Busch, we think I ultimately, if I had to pick a spot for Kyle Busch, I think he's going to land up in the 7. I just think his time, he doesn't, I don't know if he'd necessarily say use the right term, like being an RCR. I think he's just frustrated with it with RCR, and I do think he still wants a path for his son back in the truck series, and it makes sense with Spire Motorsports, or if Colleague is going truck racing in 2028 or 2027, excuse me, it would make sense for them to get a veteran driver and put a face on that brand. Because no offense to who's at Colleague now, it doesn't feel like they have, like, you go back, like when Dodge went in, they got Casey Kane, they got Ray Everham. They don't have that person yet. So could it be Kyle Busch? Those are kind of the two spots I would see for Kyle Busch if I'm predicting the future for him.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with Kyle Busch. I don't want to see him kind of go to, for lack of a better term, like a back marker. Although I guess with this next gen era, like any team, any week, any season can go and be competitive. And I don't even know who I'm calling a back marker at this point. I'm just thinking of like Darrell Waltrip in his last years when he was driving like the 66 car. I feel like that's almost the direction that Kyle Busch is headed. But I mean, Spire's shown speed with Hocevar. I'm excited to see what Spire brings this year. I'd be really curious to see if they can get all 3 teams functioning on a basis. But then also, like, I know you mentioned maybe Kyle Busch to the 7, but like I don't know. Like then what happens with Daniel Suarez? Does he get?
Well, Suarez is on a
or...
one. Jordan Bianchi already confirmed this with the Athletic. He is on a 1-year deal. So,
yeah, that's tough.
It's prove it time. So my most intriguing car available is the 48 because it is at Hendrick Motorsports. I think it's the only spot that prevents Tyler Reddick from staying at 2311 is if HMS tries to pull a like Joe Gibbs Racing when they had, like Bush, Hamlin, Edwards, and Kenseth. They're like, we're just going to have 4 of the 6 best drivers in the series on one team. And I could see that happening. And again, this is someone who thinks Alex Bowman is kind of underrated and thinks that this format actually suits him better because he is more consistent than you think. So while I think there is a shot that he stays in the 48, I am very intrigued by what HMS decides to do in that 48. And if they truly go big game hunting and get one of these big names to make a shock deal, obviously it would be that might be the first domino to fall in all of this.
Yeah, I'm pretty sold on Alex Bowman. I know all his fans are well, not Alex's fans, but a bunch of those Chevy Hendrick fans are trying to keep kicking him out. But I mean, it just feels like there's always going to be that 4th Hendrick driver that like slightly falls behind, but like a slightly behind Hendrick driver is still better than 75% of the field.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. What was the car you were talking about now?
I mean, I was just thinking about a couple. I don't know that it's like going to happen anytime in the near future, but I keep waiting on, like, you talk about Alex Bowman being a guy that people are always talk like conspiracy with his future and everything. I keep waiting on maybe some shifts with like the 2 and the 3. And like I know those are both seats that some people would look at them and maybe call them, like, I hate to say Nepo seats, but like people look at those and be like, oh, those
Tim
guys
Cindric
are secure.
has a way lesser role now at Team Penske than he used to have.
Exactly, which I mean that's a whole listen to your IndyCar people for him coming back and getting that
Shout
role.
out to the pit straight.
But like Austin did go out and win a race last year, but we mentioned earlier like the playoff format kind of benefited him, and he's got a lot of catching up to do with his teammates. And I don't think he's like him where he runs on a weekly basis compared to where Austin Dillon runs on a weekly basis. I think Cindric is a little bit better, but I think he's still got a lot to show. And I think those Penske cars are really good. And then I just feel like Austin Dillon is closer than we think to stepping into some sort of a manager role for Richard. I don't know why I think this, but like I
He is
think that could
managing
be.
their they own a pro PBR team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah,
And
the
he's
Carolina
kind of on the
Cowboys.
management side of that. So
And for some reason, I keep like waiting for him to decide that he's gonna like just step back and do something else. And then while I'm on it, talking about these possible open seats, I think I mean if Corey Heim outperforms Riley Herbst in all their races this year, like
sorry.
you
Say
say when, when I mean, I guess that wouldn't be like a huge open seat because I think a lot of people would just assume Corey would take that
Yes.
35 or whatever. But
I
yeah,
think 2311 will be a really interesting team going forward, assuming they keep Reddick, where you have maybe the best young prospect next to Connor Zilic. You have one of the most talented drivers in Tyler Reddick, and then one of the most, I think, a top 10-ish driver with maybe outside of Chase, the most marketing in Bubba Wallace. Like I think 2311 would position, and clearly based off the lawsuit, they're going to spend a lot of money. So I I feel I hate firing a guy. We don't get to do that. Maybe Riley Herbst wins the Daytona 500 and we have to eat crow and he keeps his ride.
be incredible.
Which I may or may not tonight. The second guy I've said that outside of them winning the Daytona 500, they would keep their ride. Y'all can guess who else that is. But that was in a private chat. But again, silly season. We're going to talk about it a lot throughout this, especially this podcast, because we talk about the news. Obviously, the format for this podcast typically is an interview, whether I get it or our great team that goes to the track each week gets it. They go into the inferno. Then what's still hot is the latest headlines. Then we hear sound bites from your favorite drivers and react to that with the sound bite of the week. And then we close with some final thoughts. But since this is being the season preview of Bringing the Heat, we've changed the format of it a little bit. But first, before we get to some sound bites that we actually have from Media Day, we do want to hear one more word from our great sponsor, Billy's Tequila. That's promo code RACER for 5% off from Billy's Tequila. Of course, Billy's Tequila, no additives, small batch, delivered right to your door. Order now at billystequila.com and celebrate the race of life. Use promo code RACER for 5% off. Shout out to Billy's Tequila, proud sponsor here at frontstretch.com. All right, Caleb, Media Day was yesterday when we were supposed to record on Wednesday. And so we have some thoughts from it. I do want to start with Greg Biffle. Jimmy Johnson, Denny Hamlin obviously raced with him, but also Ryan Blaney, who built a relationship with him. They all had some comments about it, and that's going to be our first clip we play here for some sound bites for Media Day.
Favorite memory of Greg Biffle?
Many. Many. I think the first thing I remember is when the Craftsman Truck Series was getting started. I was trying to work on a couple of trucks and hanging out on the West Coast, and it wasn't Bakersfield. I'm trying to remember the little track that they used to go to out in the desert. But anyway, this plain white truck, young guy, sideways, hauling butt. And I knew he was like a local kind of short track guy, but you're out there with Hornaday and Skinner and Sprague and all these guys. There's this young guy just ripping it. And so, became a big fan of him and got to know him more, but, had a lot of incredible battles with him. Another one that comes to mind is running each other out of gas at Michigan. I thought I was saving fuel, leading, doing a great job, and I ran out of gas, and Greg thought he did a great job, and he ran out of gas about a half a lap later. Mark Martin was the only one saving fuel and went along and won, and we had a huge laugh about that after. Once the sting went away after losing the race.
Do you have a favorite memory of Greg Biffle?
My favorite memory was racing against him in the Xfinity Series or O'Reilly Series 20 some years ago. I was a rookie. He was a NASCAR, one of the guys that would come down and race on Saturdays, and just trying to beat that guy was just incredibly difficult, if not impossible. So he was just the gold standard for me when I when I came into the sport in 2004 on speed.
Yeah. Greg was. I loved watching Greg growing up. He's one of my favorite drivers. And when I got into the Cup Series, and I made a couple starts in 14, ran half a year in 15. He was still racing, and did a lot of Ford events with him. So he was always at those, and he was just, always just a genuinely good human being, and was always very kind to me when I was younger, whether I was competing. I remember, being on driver intro stage with my dad and Greg being there, and my dad had a ton of respect for Greg, and so it was I became a fan of him before I even started racing or things like that, because my dad would always talk about Greg and how much he respected him and how good he was. And and then when he got out of the sport, I bought a jet ski from him one time. So that was he was like, yeah, come out to my lake house and you can test drive jet skis. So that was neat. And just a genuinely good human being. And I don't think that's a secret to anybody. And the work he did in the mountains was, no one was doing that stuff, and it just shows what kind of heart he had. So I have a lot of good memories about Greg, both as a competitor and as a person.
Caleb, obviously the tragedy we talked about a little bit earlier of Greg Biffle, but what does it say? You have obviously Jimmy, who's the greatest of all time, arguably any generation. Everything that goes with it. Like it feels like when this when this tragic event happened, there was nowhere close to a negative word said about Greg Biffle. It truly felt like he was one of the most special human beings you could cross paths with in NASCAR.
Yeah, it's cool to hear those perspectives of the things that happened that we didn't all see. And it's also interesting, like whenever, I don't think many people knew a ton of that about Greg really until some of the later things, until he got involved with Cletus McFarland and until the hurricane relief efforts and things like that. And so it's been neat to see kind of like the way that Greg's been remembered and start hearing those stories. And it just makes you wish, like, man, I really wish that we got to see some more sides of that as well, through things like what Ram's doing and through the kind of the exposure that the YouTube channel had with Cletus and things like that. So, but yeah, it's neat to see all the tributes going on for him this weekend, and just see the way that everybody's kind of remembering who he was to them.
Here on Bringing the Heat, obviously reacting to media days in NASCAR. Another star of that was obviously Connor Zilisch. Connor, Dalton, our guy. By the way, speaking of Dalton Hopkins, who helped us get these clips, he has a great article about drivers talking about Greg Biffle that's out for frontstretch.com. Dalton and Tanner Marlowe are there all weekend giving us great coverage. So make sure you check them both out and everything coming to frontstretch.com throughout the weekend at Daytona. But speaking of Connor Zilisch, he made Dalton ask about making comparisons to Jeff Gordon. And hear his thoughts about that.
When you get compared, when you see that you're getting compared to guys like Jeff Gordon, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, hard to comprehend, I would say. I think I don't know why yet, right? I've run obviously a lot of races in the lower levels, but to be compared to Jeff Gordon, I feel like you got to do something at this level, and I'm yet to do that. I haven't had the opportunity to do that. That starts this year, and I'm hoping to make a name for myself, but it's certainly going to take time to get to the level of a guy like him.
I know we're so early, we haven't even started the season yet, but what constitutes a successful season for you, a successful rookie season for you?
I think the biggest thing for me is just to, if I can look back and say I got better each week and I ended the year multiple steps ahead of where I start today, I think that's what success looks like to me.
So we're going to take that question at the end. He's being compared to Jeff Gordon, Kyle Larson. He's probably the most hyped prospect we've had in quite some time. Successful season for Connor Zilisch, year one in the NASCAR Cup Series is what, Caleb Barnes?
I think a successful season is just logging as many laps as you can, record like 4 or less DNFs, trying to finish on the lead lap. Like, I know a lot of people have sky high expectations for him. I'm really curious to see what that looks like on the ovals. Um, I think a successful season for Connor on the road courses will be maybe like a lockstep behind SVG, kind of mixing it up with those guys, just as good as he's been on the road courses. Um, I like he's shown so much potential and everything, but at the same time, we've seen just that the Cup Series is a completely different beast, and I mean, you hear about it every weekend. Um, I'll be really curious to compare his starts and his stats to Corey Heim and the way that Corey Heim is kind of. I mean, Heim hasn't had a ton of races, but he's had a couple solid runs in what little starts that he has had. And then I just feel like it's so tough. Like, there's been a ton of guys I feel like that, like every new young prospect, people are like, he's the next Jeff Gordon, he's the next Jeff Gordon. And I feel like Kyle Larson kind of took that on, and he's the guy that I would say most is like kind of feels like he pulled a little bit into Jeff Gordon's role as that young guy who's kind of growing into a multi-time champion, a weekly competitor, things like that. And then even like, I mean, I don't know that we've ever talked about like the next Jimmy Johnson or whatever. Like Jimmy Johnson wasn't a super. I feel like he just kind of
came out of nowhere. I mean, he was
Yeah.
a guy who didn't have, he didn't have the success in the lower two series, and he just came like somehow Jeff Gordon knew he was really good and told
Yeah.
Rick Hendrick, and it went from there.
And the two, like I feel like we have a modern version of those two. Like Larson is the Jeff Gordon. I almost feel like William Byron is very similar to Jimmy Johnson, into where everywhere they go, they're just really solid. And so that's what, like, I don't know where Connor Zilic fits into that. Like, I don't know that I would call him the next Jeff Gordon or Jimmy Johnson. I don't know that I would expect that out of him. Maybe Denny Hamlin. Is Connor Zilic the next Denny Hamlin? Can we make that comparison? I don't know.
That's not a bad one. I mean, I guess at this point you could call him the next Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson's been around so long.
Maybe
We're gonna.
Connor's just driven so many different things. Like Larson had
Yeah.
that dirt background. Connor's like has an everything background.
Yeah, the thing is, I feel better about him. I will say this: you want to compare him to SVG? I feel better about him on ovals than I did this time last year with SVG because he won so many different ovals in the Xfinity series, and he's already won on ovals, whereas SVG didn't even come close. And I know there was less cars, but SVG also had a whole year in the Xfinity series too. So it's not like what's his name? Connor Zilic didn't have kind of the same runway as SVG had, which I will mention. By the way, I think the idea is maybe get a win or two. We'll talk about that in a second about what I think about Connor Zilic. But contend for wins at the road courses, I think, and then hover around between, maybe sneak into the chase and hover around between 16th and 20th in points, I think is a very successful rookie season for Connor Zilic. Do want to plug this? We're not going to be able to play it because we want to keep this podcast under an hour, and we got some other things to do. So we're cutting it for time. Ty Gibbs had a really good conversation with the media, including Dalton. Check that video out on the Front Stretch Plus channel right now after you finish this, or if you're listening on the audio feed. Do want to plug that because that was some great content. Ty showed some like true emotion, true kind of character. It felt like we saw his personality a little bit there, so I do want to shout that out. But we're here for times. All right, final thoughts. We can actually wave the checkered flag bit, so we're gonna wave the checkered flag for our final thoughts as we give some picks out.
It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line. Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag.
The checkered flag is out, and it's time for the final thoughts.
Typically with final thoughts, we rant, rave, or review one thing, but I have some questions for you. All right. We're going to pick the Daytona 500 winner. No, we'll pick the champion last. We'll go first with the Daytona 500. Who do you have winning the Daytona 500?
This is a really boring pick, but I think Joey Logano is going to win the 500. I just think that those forwards, we always, every year, the forwards are so strong. The forwards this, the forwards that. But I feel like it's actually been a while since they've truly been strong and dominant. And, like, I mean, especially like Logano's the guy who Used to always be up front leading those races. Feels like he's getting taken out of every single one now. I think he gets back on top. I think the villain, Mr. Worldwide, whatever. I don't know if we have a nickname for Joey in his
He's
current
bald
state
now.
yet.
I know.
But yeah, it's my pick. It's boring. I know. I don't care.
So for the viewers, I wrote down all my picks, and I initially started to write down Zane Smith.
You mean instinctually, not initially?
I did, and I really wanted to pick Zane, but I was like, I'm not. I'm gonna go with the guy who finished second twice in this race, and he impressed me in Duel 1, even though he got wrecked making that move. It was Bubba Wallace. He's a guy that can break the Ford's pack in this. I think he's really good at super speedway racing, and I feel like you always want to pick a guy you know is going to be there late and has had enough bites at the apple. And the fact that this guy has finished second twice, to me, screams that he will be there at the end. So I will go with the 23 of Bubba Wallace to do that. All right, bold prediction for the entire season. I have two, and they kind of go together. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first. I just have one.
So, first off, and we'll get to our playoff picks. My bold prediction is both Carson Hocevar and Connor Zilisch make the chase. I don't know about winning for Carson Hocevar, but I think if they can just put the third stage of races together, they will make the chase based off of last season. And I think with Spire's investment, they're making leaps and bounds in their improvement on the racetrack. So I will go with Carson Hocevar making the chase along with Connor Zilisch as a rookie. And Connor Zilisch does it by winning, and I'm going to use this keyword here, at least 2 races this season. There's enough road courses, and he is good enough at those where he will only have to beat one guy, and that is SVG, and he has done it before. I think Connor Zilisch, I might be a little early on this, but I think he wins multiple races in his rookie year and makes the race for the chase.
Well, I'm gonna kind of play off of one of your predictions, Trey. Mine is gonna flip a little bit. I actually think Carson Hocevar wins multiple races, and I think he's definitely gonna ruffle some feathers. But just the speed that he had at some of those races last year, whether it was luck, whether it was like I feel like it wasn't even whenever Carson was running well, I feel like it wasn't poor decisions. When he was further back in the field, I think that's when you saw the poor decisions come out. But like that race at the Coke 600 last year, like I think he legitimately could have won that had he not had engine issues. And I think we're going to see that version. Now, I do think Carson is the kind of guy that strikes me as if he's got a win in front of him, he's just going to drive through somebody to do it. So that's why I think he's going to ruffle some feathers. And then I guess my bonus chase prediction, which we'll get to I don't want to jump the gun too much on that, but I think we see a surprise Legacy Motor Club car in the chase this year.
Ooh, okay. So let's get to that. We're predicting our chase field, then we'll predict our champion. I think stop me if you don't agree with me, so we can knock these out quickly. All of Hendrick Motorsports.
Yes.
All of it. All of Joe Gibbs Racing.
I don't think I've
11, 19, 20, 54. I have those all in.
I did leave Ty Gibbs off.
Okay.
I might regret that later. I could see either way for Ty Gibbs.
All right.
He better make it though. I don't have him in my prediction, but he needs to.
All right. I have the 22 and the 12.
Yes, me too.
I don't have the 2.
I also do not have the 2. I do not have the 2, but I do have the 2, if that makes sense. Picking up one, put down.
Double 2s. Yep.
Yeah.
And Caleb wears 2 2s. All right. Anyways, I only have one from RFK, and that's the 17.
Same here. Although the way Priest looked in the Clash could be, I could see him competing.
I had him on if I had like a 17th, 18th, he's in that mix. Like I think we're gonna be talking about Priest at Daytona, the second Daytona, getting into the chase. Let's put it that way. Like he'll be part of the cutoff crew. I have 23 and 45.
Yep, me too.
All right. I have I have so obviously, and then my last three are the 1, the 77, and the 88.
I have the 77. I left off the 1 and the 88. And the 1 might be surprising for people, but
So none from Trackhouse, or do you have SVG in?
I do have SVG, and that's another one of my takes. I feel like I know everybody thinks that his lack of over prowess is going to hurt, but I think he improves enough this year and has the road courses to where he barely gets in.
The weird part about SVG is I actually think like it's not the format that prevents him from getting out. It's that he now has someone that is just as good at that skill set with him in the series, where like he basically has to go perfect in all the to make it. He has to kind of go perfect, and I just don't see him going perfect in the road courses, even with his oval improvements. I just don't see him going perfect in the road courses because of Connor Zilic.
I don't know. I feel like he's got to like just having the experience he does versus Connor. Like this is his first year, and I mean he hasn't run any next gen road. He was supposed to at Watkins Glen last year, and then we know what happened there. So that's the part that's kind of hard to predict. But I feel like SVG is enough ahead that this year he's like it'll be if it's like 1-2, like he's going to be 1 every time versus like the Xfinity Series they flipped flopped from race to race.
We'll see. Connor Zilic currently 8th in the second Daytona duel with Ty Dillon leading with 20 to go. All right.
From Stenhouse.
So who do you have filling? So we have 3 that are different, if I'm not mistaken.
So my different was the 97. I guess I had the 77. I'm trying to think of who else. I also put the 42 in there.
So you have John Hunter.
That's my Legacy Motor Club
and then
prediction.
Do you have Priest in?
Oh, did I? I thought I counted 16. Hang on. I do think it's going to come down to between Priest and Keselowski. I know, like I was borderline Keselowski. I know he had a long off season. I know he's not.
So you have
been super. I think those two are going to battle for it. I guess if I'm going to commit to one on the spot here, I think I'll commit to Priest. But I think both of those RFK cars, I think they've closed the gap on Penske, and they'll be right there. Sorry, I thought I'd pick 16.
You're good. So sum it up. Both of us have all of HMS. I have all of Joe Gibbs Racing. He does not have Ty Gibbs in that mix. We have the two Penske cars, the 22 and the 12. He has 2 from RFK, the 17 and the 60. I just have the 17. 2 from 2311, the 23 and the 45. I have 2 from Trackhouse, the 1 and the 88. You just have the 97. You have this. We both have the 77, and then you also have the 42. And that is our chase fields. Ultimately, who is your champion?
It's so hard to pick and narrow those guys down. I feel like going back to connecting the beginning shot. I feel like just the guy that this benefits the most, that can find the most consistency. I feel like it's this year. I feel like it's going to be William Byron. He's been super close. He made the championship for the last couple of years, just with decent runs through the chase. And I know he kind of like last year was a little bit different because he had the situation take him out. But I think whenever you the people do those, they calculate like who would have been the championship under this year, and like Byron would have had a championship underneath some of these previous formats. And I think it's going to help him out. He's going to get it this year.
So I think we can agree the funniest possible outcome is Joey Logano winning this championship.
Yeah. Hey, that's another one.
Even year. And the fact that like everyone, he was the poster boy of the old format, which by the way, he would have won, I think, the most titles.
I think he would have won 4 if we didn't if we never went away from the chase. Yeah.
Yeah. Something crazy like that. Obviously it's not like for like comparison because different outcomes happen. But Joey Logano would be the funniest possible outcome. But like you, I'm going with the guy who I picked to be the biggest winner driver wise. I'm going with Chase Elliott. I just something about this team in this format. Obviously, Hendrick Motorsports is clearly the best at this format. Well, Penske was probably the best at the old format, or it's now flipped. The old new format and the new old format, if you want to really say it. But when it comes to the chase, obviously Alan Gustafson was a long time with Jeff Gordon in this format. I just something about Chase Elliott's consistency, I think, gets it done, and he wins the first year of this format. And there we have it. We did it. 1 down, 30 whatever plus to go. Caleb. Obviously got nothing coming out. This is all you do for frontstretch.com now. So this is all we do. Check out the latest episode of Happy Hour with Stephen Malazzi. Also, the latest episode of Through the Gears. Tune into the Front Stretch watch party on Sunday. Mike Neff and I will be there. Maybe Tom Bowles will be there as well. We're 2:30. Just come to the YouTube page. We'll be here reacting live to the Daytona 500 here as well. So for at Caleb Barnes, I'm at Trey Lyle VT, signing off from this episode of Bringing the Heat. We're here. NASCAR is back, and we're so excited to watch it along with all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Bringing the Heat.